We have familiar words to label gang violence and the emotions they evoke. Words like senseless, brazen, cruel. From this, it becomes convenient to think of gang members as different than the rest of us. We use words like antisocial, for instance, to describe them, pointing out the fact that many of their actions break the social contract we have not to cause harm to one another. I'm a criminologist, and a famous theory in my field describes the relationships of criminals as cold and fragile. But how about cooperative, supportive, helpful? How about loyal? It's indeed a mistake to see gang members as different than the rest of us when it comes to social behavior. Gang members structure their relationships the same way we all do. Their breaking of the social contract doesn't mean that they lack the capacity for social bonding. They have the same needs to connect we all have. In fact, I argue that it is their fundamentally human capacity to cooperate that allows them to do what they do. Yes, sometimes to commit violent crimes. But perhaps as a silver lining, it also allows them and allow us to work through an exit plan. I understand the logic of associating violence with individuals who appear not to care about others. But the violence itself is not the product of people who lack the ability to connect. Instead, it's the very unfortunate outcome of something deeply social that is embedded in the gang. In some twisted way, perhaps, gang members care so strongly about their friends that violence emerges when a very similar group comes to threaten them. But this is not a bad people problem. It's a social network problem. In this talk, I will show how this shift in thinking about the sociability of gang members matter very much for the way that we handle them when coming through the criminal justice system, and what we expect of them upon release. How networks are central to what they do, how they do it, and why they do it. And I will use this information to think through a range of solutions that put social networks at the forefront. But let me be clear from the get-go. I don't believe gangs are a social good that we need to nurture in any way. Like the rest of you, I'd rather have gang members use their social skills for social good. I'm saddened by the hurt caused by gang violence in my community here in BC. I do not propose that acts of violence go unaddressed or unpunished. What I'm saying is that punishment alone won't help. What I'm saying is that by pushing aside the social elements of gang behavior in our handling of gang members, we are setting them and ourselves for failure. Gang membership is not a death sentence. There is a life after gangs. And for many, it may start with connecting with someone credible, someone who has been through it like they have. This became so salient to me after I met Jordan, ex-gang member, longtime enforcer, and debt collector for a major gang here in the Lower Mainland. What first struck me about Jordan is how eager he was to connect with young people and share his message. Wait, well, that's not true. What first struck me about Jordan is how scary he was. Tall and bulky, full sleeve of gang tattoos, mohawk haircut. You could tell that, yeah, he was probably doing a good job of scaring people for a living. So after I met him, what first struck me about Jordan is how essential it was for him to be that person who gives kids a credible voice to talk about gang issues in words that they understand. And also, for the kids who were already caught up in the web of gangs, he was giving them a way out, hope of a life after gangs. But let me tell you something crucial about Jordan. Although he went through a sort of transformation by exiting gang life, deep down, he's basically the same guy. The anger issues, the ADHD, the impulses, they don't disappear with gang exit. He's the same guy with anger issues, but he controls them better. Part of it is sheer motivation. But this motivation is much more effective when embedded in a supportive social network. He became accountable to himself, but also to others. Transform the network if you want to change the behavior. See, gang culture requires that you retaliate, that you right the wrongs, the tit for tat. Gang violence is respected, it's expected, and reinforced in gang networks. But the people in gangs, they're not so different. Gang members form a community of their own, a social structure in which many of the same rules apply. After years of doing research on gangs, I realized that understanding this, the social networks of gangs, is the first and most fundamental step in helping solve the problem of gang violence. So what do we learn from looking at the social networks of gang members? The first point is that their social networks are not so different than our social networks. Their patterns of cooperation are similar. But their cooperation occurs under much more stressful conditions than ours. And that stress, the risks that they take, it makes their social connections even more important to them. Put yourself in their shoes for a minute. As a gang member, everyone is out to get you. The police can arrest you for your latest fight or for drug dealing. Your fellow gang members, because they know what you do, can tell the police on your activities and act as informants. Rival gang members hope for nothing more than to catch you without your crew. And what do gang members do to overcome these obstacles? They create brotherhoods. They emphasize trust and social connections among themselves. Remember Jordan? One of his tattoos, the one that starts the sleeve at the wrist, is a tattoo of the word brotherhood, something he got done with 6 of his fellow gang members to mark their bond to the gang, because it was that important to them. No matter where we look, gangs tend to form social units that mimic the other social groups we have and that we all belong to, including our family. Most gangs will have anywhere from 10 to 25 members, and sometimes, but rarely, a whole lot more. But you shouldn't see these 25 people as all hanging out together, as this block of 25 people. Gang members don't have time for everyone in the network. They hang out, for the most part, with 4 or 5 close friends, and that's it. Not unlike how we go about our own friendships. Do you invite all of your friends to dinner on a given Saturday? Of course you don't. And be honest, you didn't invite them all to your wedding either. Well, gang members don't hang out with everyone in their network either. Research studies comparing the social networks of gang members to non-members show that there are no statistically significant differences. Their networks vary from small to large in the same ways as ours. And they vary from dense to sparse in the same ways as well. Their networks provide the same type of social support and help that our networks do. I think you get the idea. In their form and in their size, the social networks of gang members provide the same type of social support that our networks provide. The second point and takeaway message that we got from research on social networks and gangs is that even the least cooperative act that gang members do, the gang conflict, is a direct consequence of their investment in social networks. Gang violence is an amplified version of any conflict. In that conflicts, even ours, are social acts at their core. Think about it. We fight with the people we know, and we fight when the people we know are under threat. In our case, of course, we're talking about minor disagreements, arguments that are not lethal. Well, let's hope. But for gang members, the consequences are sometimes much more serious. Gang violence is contagious precisely because gang members invest so much in the brotherhood, so much into cooperative behavior. A threat from rivals is an invitation for retaliation, even if the threat is not to you personally, but to one of your brothers. And this part is key. Gang members experience so much more violence than others because they are embedded in this type of social network. Call it masculinity, respect, gang culture. Those are all important parts of an identity that has been forged by social networks. The shape of the network determines the length of the chain of violent events. The more connected is the victim of a gang crime, the more likely is the chain to continue. Shooters tend to know their victims, and victims their shooter. Their relationship is why they care about the fight in the first place. My graduate student and I applied this idea right here in the Lower Mainland to help solve one of the most violent conflicts that we have witnessed in Surrey. The starting point, victims of gang violence. We went back 5 years inside police databases to map their social interactions. And we repeated this process with every victim of gang violence that year. And what did we find? We found that they belonged to the same social network. As many as 85% of gang violence victims belong to the same social network, with anyone on either side of the conflict being within 2 to 3 handshakes away from each other. Importantly, we found that the individuals who were the most connected in year 1 were also the most likely to get shot in year 2 and 3. And this in itself is quite remarkable. Knowing your position in the network now can help predict if you'll become a victim in the future. Our work on this is very recent and thus has yet to be published, but it replicates point by point locally similar work that has been done by Northwestern University sociologist Andrew Papachristo over the last 10 years in multiple cities in America. So what? Why does it matter to know that gang members are unexpectedly good at social cooperation, or that gang violence spreads through social networks? Well, it matters for 2 important reasons. First, it matters because if the mechanisms are similar, we can use information on these networks not simply to understand violence, but to help reduce it. One thing that networks don't do is to make the violence appear more acceptable. But perhaps it can make the violence appear less unpredictable. It is preventable like other diseases, like COVID-19, that spread through social networks. As my colleague Papachristo puts it, the violence is tragic, but it's not random. We can do something about it. Second, it matters because we need to realize that when we're asking gang members to exit gang life, we're asking them also to exit their social support, their family. And this is very hard to do. It would be for any of us. It's a dramatic shift in their life that requires not just life skills, but also to rebuild a new social network that would be focused on prosocial behavior. The impetus is both on them to harvest the most prosocial elements of their network to facilitate the disengagement from gangs, and also on us to help them manage old and new relationships as they plan their exit. And I believe it's within reach for 2 reasons. First, research shows that network-based interventions can work. Some of the most promising programs on gang exit either have a strong mentorship component or they propose an alternative community where gang members can connect and feel that they belong. Second, numerous studies show that the social networks of gang members are varied. They contain a mix of people who commit crimes and others who don't. And this matters quite a bit when it comes to time to think through an exit plan. A plan that would identify the most prosocial elements of these networks and activate them for the purpose of disengagement from gangs. In thinking about gang exit, don't simply destroy the old network and hope for magical success. Success will come if we nurture new social networks to replace the old. Remember Jordan? What got Jordan out? Well, it's a combination of things. But first and foremost are key social connections who were there to support his move. First, to a girlfriend. Falling in love helps tremendously with so many things, really. So he had a supportive girlfriend and a family that was still willing to be there for him. Something that Jordan told me when we were talking about his gang exit is how his parents were there to pick him up after he was released from prison. His friends who were still incarcerated, no one picked them up after their release. They waited for the next bus to bring them home. Jordan was able to reconfigure his social network to emphasize prosocial activities. And now he does it for others, just like these two teenagers he mentored, shown here at their high school graduation. The science on network-based interventions is young. Social networks and mentorships are no silver bullet. They won't, alone, provide all of the tools that are necessary for gang members to exit gangs and not look back. Here I simply urge criminologists and anyone who is impacted by gang violence to include networks in their plans. Success won't come without taking stock of the networks of gang members. In my research, this is where I'm going. Network methods are already there for us to implement. And former gang members who are genuine and want to help may be amenable to become mentors, like Jordan. But they too need a network to make it happen. They need us. Thank you.